Hello and welcome to the Malika Writes channel. My name is Malika Writes, and today we will be answering some questions from the comment section. YouTube has, for some reason, decided not to allow me to type my answers out in the comment section, so I will be covering some of them in this YouTube video. So the first question we're dealing with is, would you say there is a similar but different male archetype? The rebel lone wolf, perhaps? Figures like Peter Pan, the man with no name, Jack Sparrow, etc. for contemporary examples. Now, this question comes from my latest video, an introduction to witches, the archetypal woman. I would say that the opposite, or perhaps the male equivalent of the witch, is quite literally the wizard. The huge thing about the witch and the wizard is the choice. These are figures that aren't necessarily exiled from society, but they make a choice to leave society and to live apart from it. And that's in a very big way part of their power and part of their appeal. They have decided to leave this structured environment and take on the chaos by themselves. And so that's kind of what gives them this mysterious aura. And so that's part of the appeal of the archetype. It's that choice. It's the ability to choose. Now, the rebel can fit into this, definitely. But the lone wolf tends to be the outcast. It tends to be the one who was driven out of society, who was never shown any love by society, and so sort of had to make do with what they had. It's not something they probably would have chosen. And the thing is with most lone wolves is that they don't really survive very long, and they turn out very cruel and sort of twisted. Now, obviously, the witch and the wizard, they have their fair share of negative stories, but it's more of a choice. It's more of something that they choose to be wild. They choose to be the outcasts rather than having forced to have been the outcasts. If you have to look at most witches, not just in European folklore, but just around the world, as many as you have ugly hags and witches that are just horrible and eat children, you also have an abundance of attractive and beautiful witches who are able to beguile people, and they're not cast out of society. In fact, they're almost a little bit feared for their sheer beauty. And one of the folklores that we're going to cover is this Indian myth, and the only way that you can kind of know this beautiful woman is a witch is because her feet are backwards. But that tends to be the way that most witches are sort of portrayed in folk tales. They're not these horrible hags that instantly you sort of know that this is a horrible creature. There is an alluring element of that. And even in the Grimm's brothers' tales, the witch doesn't immediately look frightening. She actually looks quite kind. She invites the children in. She literally lives in a candy house. So these are not figures who immediately evoke repulsion. They are figures that are quite attractive in one way or another, be it their house or their physical appearance. So I think, to answer that question, the different but male equivalent would be the wizard. So on to the next question. I don't think that goodness and purity is something that people expect from women. I think it's more that what people hope from women. Unlike all other animals, humans are evil by nature. A woman left to her own devices and untamed by civilization would be a witch. Virtue should never be taken for granted. Okay, so I agree with parts of this and disagree with other parts. So purity and goodness are definitely expectations that are placed on women. They are not things that are hoped for from women. There are expectations that have in the past been enforced either by societal law in a way, or just the behavioral patterns that are punished and rewarded. that's how you enforce something. And when something is enforced, it's an expectation, like the expectation for men to cater to their families. That in our modern culture is enforced by law. That hasn't always been the case. If you even look at our language, there are certain derogatory words used for women who have not been pure in a sexual manner, or have not been pure in their speech. Taming of the Shrew is an example of language that is used when a woman is not this holier than thou sort of person. So it's not a hope, it's an expectation, and it's one that has been enforced. And that's why, for a lot of reasons, that's why there is this pushback against that, because historically and even recently there hasn't really been a pushback against that expectation on the scale that we're seeing it, and it's sort of almost boiled up to the point where just merely having an expectation of women, good or bad, is seen as misogynist or seen as some kind of sexist. So to just keep it short, it's definitely an expectation. You can argue that in recent times it hasn't been as much of an expectation and perhaps has become something of a hope, but it is definitely something that has been, and I would think continues to be an expectation on women. So but I do agree that humans are evil by nature. The Bible does say that the heart of man is desperately wicked, and I believe that. So I don't think a woman left to her own devices becomes a witch, though, because the whole thing with the witch is choice. And in order for you to have choice, there needs to be some kind of option. There needs to be some kind of opposition or crossroad, something that makes you have to have an internal conflict. While I do agree that without guidance, people become degenerates, but I don't think the witch is what women become when left to their own devices. I think the witch is more of a deliberate choice to rebel against a set order. So it's not about if there was no order, people will be witches. It's more of because there is an order that to an extent that for the most part has become oppressive. This is what it produces. It's like the Dionysus rituals that women used to go to in ancient Greece, where they, for one night, they would sort of get really drunk, and any man who interrupted this particular ritual will be torn to pieces by housewives and virgins. So it's that kind of breath of life thing, or when the system has become tyrannical, there's this outcry of rage, and that's what the witch is. So while yes, you do see a lot of characteristics of the witch in degenerate behavior, it's more of a response to something than it is just a complete fall. But I do agree that virtue should never be taken for granted. So this video is already long, and I do want to be able to give very detailed sort of responses to people's questions. So I will just leave it here for now, and I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I'm going to go back through the previous videos and then answer all the questions there. So this particular video is going to be for an introduction to which is the archetypal woman, because that's where these two questions came from. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. I hope that you're looking forward to the next installation of which is the archetypal woman. So thank you very much for listening, and this has been the Malika Writes channel.